evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Williams, acting company member and artistic associate here at PlayMakers. I am so happy to welcome you to this very special episode of Ray Dooley's Think Like an Actor, part of our PlayMakers Keeping You Company series. Now, after 6 episodes digging into Shakespeare and in anticipation of our next streaming production, Ray is turning to another kind of classic tonight, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Starting December 14th, you can stream Ray's one-man version of the holiday classic in radio play format. This is perfect for curling up with the whole family. And speaking of, I hope that you were able to join us for the beginning of our streaming season of virtual theatrical experiences with our encore presentation of Temples of Lung and Air, and then our staged reading of The Storyteller. And if not, don't worry, there's more where that came from, including the addition of a special benefit reading of Nora and Delia Ephron's Love, Loss, and What I Wore. Marin Hinkle, Cameron Mayhem, and Deborah Messing will join me and the other women of PlayMakers for this one night only live streaming event. Premium and Plus pass holders get complimentary access to this evening's festivities, but you can also visit playmakersrep.org for info on how to purchase tickets for yourself or for others. Now, if you've missed any of our previous episodes of Think Like an Actor, you can view them anytime on our YouTube channel. We've placed the link in the chat, or you can always go to our website and find them there. Tonight, Ray turns from the ghost of Hamlet's father to several other ghosts and many, many other characters contained in Dickens' Christmas classic. Now, speaking of the chat box, while we won't be able to speak you can't talk directly to me or to Ray during the webinar, I encourage you to find the chat button at the bottom of your screen and write in any questions that you might have. You can do this at any time during the class. It won't interrupt, I promise. And I'll use some of your questions to facilitate a short question and answer when Ray is done. So, without further ado, it is my great privilege and honor to pass this off to my dear friend and colleague, the wondrous Ray Dooley.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Thank you for being here tonight. And welcome, friends. Hello. Thank you for joining us this evening for a very special chance to revisit from the inside, perhaps, the great Charles Dickens classic, A Christmas Carol. Let's start with a quick overview of the provenance of A Christmas Carol here at PlayMakers. And to do that, we go back to 1998. Our then executive producer, Dr. Millie Barringer, asked me if I would take on a one-person Christmas Carol. By that time, Sir Patrick Stewart had already done it in New York, done a version in New York, and I was excited to take on that challenge. The script that we have still is written, adapted by William Leach, an actor and director in the Philadelphia area, and Bill had adapted it and had performed it up there. And through his wife, who knew someone on our staff, Millie had the script. And I was fortunate to get the script early. I'm going to talk a little bit more about learning 43 pages of text in a minute. Bill came down and he directed our production, and it was in the Paul Green Theater, those of you who may remember from Christmas of 1998. Yes, all those years ago. And McKay Coble designed a beautiful, beautiful set, very much in the Victorian style. You may remember had a brocaded vest, poofy sleeve arm on the shirt, and there were Victorian lampposts that later, I think, re-emerged in the production of Nicholas Nickleby. Of course, in the Paul Green, with a 500-seat theater, it's a large event, and that became the Actors' Challenge. There was to project and fill that large space in what I would call a pretty straightforward theatrical production. Okay, so jump now to 2017. And Vivienne Benesch, our producing artistic director, asked if I might be interested in revisiting the script. It was 19 years later. I had attained a certain age in life. And I thought, well, yes, it's a wonderful piece, and what a great challenge, physically, mentally, to see if I could take that on again. Now, the difference this time was that it was going to be in the Elizabeth Price Keenan Theater, a theater that holds, give or take, 200 people. So it was going to be a very different event. And approaching the text, thinking like an actor, it was important to build, it was important to answer the question, who is this guy and what is he doing here? Who is this narrator guy? And over the years, as an actor, it has become more and more important to me to be myself more present in my performing. And so sitting down with our wonderful designers, Jan Chambers and Bobby Owen, who costume, Jan did the set, and Bobby did the costumes, are wonderful in-house faculty designers. And Mikey Perlman, who had joined us as associate artistic director, was directing this time. And we had the luxury of sitting down and really thinking through that. What is this event? How can we make this event truthful on all levels, personal on all levels? Because this is among the most personal of stories. So I thought, when had I gone out, or when had I told stories like this? And some of you may know that one of the things I do is occasionally go out into the community and do performances at various places. And oftentimes that might include having dinner beforehand, then going and getting ready and doing a 45-minute, 1-hour performance. And I thought, well, this is kind of like that. And so Mikey and Jan and Bobby and I were talking, and we thought, let's go with that idea. So the way that worked out, those of you who saw the production in 2017, you know, it was a simple platform, great design, always looks like it there's no design at all. And of course, Jan is a great designer. And so it was perfectly proportioned to fit in the Keenan Theater space. We had audience on 3 sides, so it was quite close. Very little up garland and a couple of upright lanterns. And Bobby, actually, I talked to Bobby about the kinds of clothes that I usually wear when I would go out into the community to do these presentations, these performances. And the design that Bobby did with the brilliant addition of the red sweater vest, it was basically the clothes that I would wear going out and doing these one-man shows out in the community. Then, thinking like an actor, I thought, okay, so on those nights, we have dinner, we talk, I go get ready, I do my show, I talk to people, that's all. I thought, well, let's do this. I was in my dressing room and I had a routine every night in the dressing room in the Keenan Theater. Warm up, put my costume on, got ready, and then went over to the coffee bar out at PlayMakers, went out into the audience, got my cup of coffee at our refreshment stand, and started talking to people, walking around the theater, as again, those of you who were there may remember this, because I wanted to make it as personal as possible, that it was me, Ray, talking with the people who had come to hear this story. And then we played the pre-show announcement, and I think it was Kathy on the pre-show announcement, and we all together listened to the pre-show announcement. That was great. And then our assistant stage manager came out, and she handed me the book. I handed her my coffee cup, opened the book, and we started the show. And it was a seamless, the attempt was a seamless change from the pre-show to the show, so that it was us sharing the story. And then Mikey is a wonderful director, and one of his great ideas was a 20-minute lighting dim. So from the moment I started, it was 20 minutes of the light getting dimmer and dimmer, unnoticeable to the audience, until 20 minutes in, we were into theatrical lighting. So again, that was the blending. So thinking like an actor with A Christmas Carol, the first thing you think, of course, when you see the script is, oh my goodness, 43 pages. Okay, here we go. So for me, happily, the script in both 1998 and 2017, I had the script the summer before and spent really all of both of those summers learning the script. And the way I did it was to read the play aloud over and over, simply read it for the first week or two. And then I would break it into 4 sections and work on 1 section a day, reading it out loud, getting it into my head. And then eventually building a scaffolding whereby I might say, okay, in this paragraph, there's a topic sentence and 3 examples. Okay, so that, and then, oh, those 3 examples are in alphabetical order. Okay, great. And building a kind of scaffolding around the lines and moving that all the way through. Okay, this is that place on page 23 where there's that enormous block of text, that narration that we must make alive. Or, oh, here's the part with the quick back and forth by the character. So learning the scaffolding of that. And then eventually you get to the point where you're working page by page, and you start at the top of the page and you see how far down the page you can go getting the lines right. And then if you miss, you go back to the top, you find out what mistake you made, you find out, and you go back and you just keep going back until you learn that whole page. Then you move on to the next page. And all the while you are refreshing yourself by reading through. The idea here is that you're trying to move the lines from short-term memory over to long-term memory. So that, and I don't know my neuroscience well enough to understand it, but that's the way it appears to me. So that even years later, I can say Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. And I can go on for 3 or 4 pages. Those lines are still in my long-term memory. So doing that over the summer then, and of course I had roles in the fall season in 1998. In fact, I was in both shows. That was our first shot at The Tempest. I don't remember what the second show was, but I kept it fresh through that because the rehearsal period really was only 2 weeks long when we started in the space. And so I needed to be off book and ready to go because we needed to work on other things in the space. So those were our, the way our productions came alive, and the way that I went about learning that script. And then of course, the more you do learn, the more it moves over to long-term memory. And you're free to be actually seeing and responding in the moment. So approaching this text in 2017, we knew it wanted to be personal. Now, you may remember, if you were with us for our very first talk on To Be or Not to Be, again, we have the single actor and an audience. And so although the speech seems to be about any number of things, the action that the actor is playing is toward the audience. One of our rules in acting, this comes from a book called The Actor and the Target, is all text seeks to change someone's perspective. Are there exceptions? No. So if that's the case, then the framework that I'm working with is I have a story to tell, and it is for you. And I am attempting in some way to change you. This is what keeps the language active, reaching out, in pursuit. What do you think about the fact that Marley was dead to begin with? And that there was no, what do you think about the fact that in came Bob with 3 foot of scarf hanging down before him? So it always is out with the audience. And looking at the text in A Christmas Carol in particular, we see 2 different kinds of text in this particular adaptation. There are long narrative passages, and there are character scenes that one must play. So let's look at those 2 different kinds of challenges, assignments, responsibilities that the actor faces. Now, to do this, let's start with the narrative language. Now, what do we mean by that? I'm going to share my screen with you here, and I've got the text. We're going to look at a few pieces. Let's go here. Okay, so we've been through the first, and let's look at this paragraph right here. Where we are, Scrooge has closed up the shop, and Bob Cratchit has run home to Camden Town. Office was closed in a twinkling, and Bob Cratchit, with the long ends of his white scarf dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could to play at blind man's buff. Okay. One of the challenges is breath control when you're dealing with material like this, because you want to keep it moving along, and you don't want to break it up too much, because if you do, the audience loses the thread. When I'm teaching this, I sometimes talk about the pearls and the necklace, and we must see each of the individual pearls, but at the same time, we must understand that it's a necklace. So let's take this next paragraph. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard where the house had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run up there when it was a young house playing at hide and seek with other houses and had forgotten the way out again. You may have seen that I took that all on one breath. Let's do it again. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard where the house had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run up there when it was a young house playing at hide and seek with other houses and forgotten the way out again. So it's that kind of breath control that you need in order to find your way through. Now, also, you'll notice that I'm changing pitch as I go. My good friend, John Basil, actor in New York, and John is a very well-known, well-respected teacher of Shakespeare. He has a book called Willpower. It actually has 3 books, but that's the first and most famous of his books. And John talks about actors' arithmetic. And what John means by that, when he's teaching Shakespeare, is 1 + 2 = 3. If music be the food of love, play on. And what that does is it makes clear the images, the words, the images, the word pictures, so that the audience can see what is happening. So here, that is what when you're dealing with a narrative passage like this is what the actor is doing to make it clear, as opposed to Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the. So that just won't do when 200 of your best friends are sitting in the audience and we are sharing the event. So again, 1 + 2 = 3. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard where the house had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run up there when it was a young house playing at hide and seek with other houses and had forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being let out as offices. So we see 1 + 2 = 3. And this is how we activate the language and keep, Cicely Berry in her wonderful book, The Actor in the Text, talks about the actor's responsibility being making what we say remarkable to the hearer. Not a dull inward looking, again, quoting Cis, not a dull inward looking speaking, but something that is reaching out, trying to change, making it remarkable to the hearer. Let's look at another example of narrative language, one of my favorite moments in the play. Of course, I have to say I had favorite moments, but this is Fezziwig. And yes, here we go. So here we can look at 2 other techniques. This is, yes, okay. Okay. So here we have our old Fezziwig, and we'll talk about Fezziwig when we look at characters. Mikey had some wonderful blocking here for this section. I'm starting here. You wouldn't believe. This is where Fezziwig says, "No more work tonight, boys. We're closed for Christmas. Let's have the shutters up." And so again, this is one of those breath control places. "You wouldn't believe how those 2 fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters 1, 2, 3, had them up in their places 4, 5, 6, barred them and pinned them 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses." Now, when we did it in the theater, I literally ran around the stage and then back up to 2 steps on the other side. So that really was a challenge here. But again, we give that sense of all of that hustle and happening. So the floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed and fuel was heaped upon the fire. So here we go, 1 + 2 = 3. The warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and as bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. Lay it in. What do you think about the fact that that was the case? So now comes the procession coming in. So now what we're doing here is we're painting a picture of what happened at, sorry, I get a little emotional about this, just the beauty of it. Woo. Okay, you'll forgive me. Wow, okay, still working in there. Wow, all right. So let's get serious. The task here, the job is to give the audience a clear picture of what is happening so that they are drawn into the event and can be affected by it. Anything that happens to the actor is a mere byproduct, but what we want is for the experience to happen out in the audience. So in came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. Of course, we're using pace and tempo. We're going fast, 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 fast. Mrs. Fezziwig comes in, and her smile lights up the room. So we're using that to make clear Mrs. Fezziwig. Now, here's a fun paragraph. In came the three Miss Fezziwigs. We're always looking for what is repeated and what is new. So we have old Fezziwig. So the word Fezziwig is in the room already, as we say, it's in the room. People have heard Fezziwig. So in came Mrs. Fezziwig. Now we're talking about Mrs. Fezziwig. Now in came the three Miss Fezziwigs. So Fezziwig is less important, and we're talking about these three young ladies now. In came the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the six young followers whose hearts they broke. We notice these are measured, balanced sentences. In came all the young men and women employed in the business, another mid-sized balanced sentence. Here we go. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. So here we have two different occasions of what we call, as in acting, repetitive contrast. So we have the in cames, and then we have the sums, right? So in came this, in came that, in came this, in came that. So the in cames, once we established that people are coming in, what's important is what is coming in, right? So in came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkmaid. In they all came. So that's the change there. In they all came, one after another. Now we have the sums. Some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some push. So all the sums go away. Now, why do we do this? It makes it easier for the audience to hear. An example of this from Dakin Matthews, one of our great actors and teachers in the United States, has a book called Shakespeare Spoken Here. And in there, he talks about William Pole, a British actor of the late 19th century. And Pole's idea was that what we should strive for as actors was to get the maximum amount of meaning, stressing the fewest amount of syllables. That way, what is important is readily available, like, let's quote Shakespeare, like bright metal on a sullen ground. It stands out, right? If I were to say, in they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some. You're hearing some, but you're not hearing what some were doing, and which is the important part. So we can move, as you see, quite quickly through the text, as long as we shape, artfully shape, using this idea of repetitive contrast. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. And again, we have that, Dickens ends it with some gracefully, in they all came, and he sums it all up, anyhow and every. So not only anyhow, but the new news, how's in the room, so it's everyhow, anyhow and everyhow. There were dances, so here we go again. What were there? There were dances and more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was mince pies, and plenty of beer. And again, we go, 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 and then he gives us a chance to finish. So we pay attention to those cues in the text, and we make it clear, and we can move quite quickly through the text with using those techniques. Let's look at one more piece of narration before we move on to some of our characters. And this, of course, was such fun to learn. Let's see, this is Ghost of, yes, this is us. This is Ghost of Christmas Present. Yeah, so I'm here. This is where Scrooge has finished with Christmas Past, and he's in his own room. And he is, he hears something in the next room. He opens the door. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that. but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. And you can hear the 1 + 2 = 3 there, right? Bright gleaming berries glistened. Heaped upon the floor were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and seething bowls of punch. So again, here in learning this, we have various mnemonic devices. We have turkey, geese, game, poultry. Okay, so good, all the meats there. Oh, great joints of meat, other kinds of meat, other suckling pigs. Then we have sausages, mince pies, plum puddings. So that was easy to memorize. Mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, then red hot chestnuts followed into chestnuts, cherry. So we can learn it that way. Cherry cheeked apples. Thank you, Mr. Dickens, for that. And then, of course, we're into fruit, cherry-cheeked apples, oranges, pears. So we link together those things. So these are some of the ways that we would learn those lines. But here, too, we're moving quickly through all this, right? Painting the picture for the audience. And then we slow down. For in easy state upon all of this, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see. And then we're on into the description of the Ghost of Christmas Present. So that is the kind of work that's necessary when we're, what we would say, activating narration, which is to say, making it remarkable to the hearer. 1 + 2 = 3. Repetitive contrast and finding and bringing out the new information. Great. So the other challenge, of course, in Christmas Carol is I don't know how many, 30 different characters that there are. And in Bill's adaptation, he writes, like we see in front of us here, let me come out of this so that we can be back together. Hello, everybody. Bill writes some big boxes of narration, big text, blocks of text, all that narration. But there are many character scenes. And the question becomes, how do you find who those characters are? And then how do you keep them straight for 90 minutes in the production? So we'll go through a couple of them and how they came to me in our iteration. So Scrooge, of course, the iconic line is "Bah, humbug," right? Actually, in the text, it's "Bah," said Scrooge, "humbug." There's a line in the opening narration where, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, and made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. So there's our hint. So Scrooge is going to have a grating voice. So as rehearsals went on, that was where Scrooge went into in my speaking. Now, the problem with a grating voice is if you use it wrong, you can really rip up your chords, your vocal cords pretty well. So I had to be very careful. Let's see, let's get some of Scrooge. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. Oh, don't be cross, Uncle. What else can I be? So for Scrooge, it had to be up into the nasal passages as well to keep it from landing here and sitting and grating on the chords. So it can be quite grating as long as it's up here. So that was Scrooge, how he came to be. And there are some parts, well, we'll talk about that in a second. Now, Bob Cratchit was wonderful. in finding Bob, because I missed Bob this year because, of course, we were doing the radio version, so it was only audio. But in front of the microphone, I was still doing, and still inhabiting Bob's body, which was very long and thin. And one of the ways of keeping these characters straight is to go ahead and cast them with people and actors. And for whatever reason, intuition, universe dropped in, and Bob Cratchit was, it's Dick Van Dyke. But it's actually Dick Van Dyke doing his very good Stan Laurel imitation. And so it's only once a year, sir. And I know, my dears. So that's my impression of Dick Van Dyke doing his Stan Laurel imitation. And that became Bob Cratchit. And it was a wonderful character because, some of the most moving, of course, parts of the play are Bob and the Cratchit family. Fred Scrooge, who comes to visit his Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you. And the thing about Fred, it's my voice. I basically speak in my own voice, but Fred is always so happy. Christmas a humbug, Uncle. I'm sure you don't mean that. I have always thought of Christmas time as a good time, as a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. And although it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it. And so every time we come back to Scrooge, if you hear our audio version, you'll hear Fred having a very, very good time. And that was how Fred became delineated. Now, of course, one of the great challenges for a number of reasons, of doing the piece is Jacob Marley. Extraordinarily powerful things. Oh boy, here we go. Extraordinary powerful things that Marley says. And so it had to be different than Scrooge, obviously. And Scrooge, who are you? Ask me who I was. Yeah, well, who were you then? You're particular for a ghost. So Scrooge is, doing his grating voice thing. So, so Marley, for contrast, had to be something different. And so I took it off the chords, made it much more like this. And where Scrooge was like, Marley became open. And I was going one day and I thought, oh my goodness, it sounds like I'm imitating Sir John Gielgud. And those of you may know Sir John Gielgud, great British actor of the early, mid, and late 20th century. And Sir John was known for his great voice and the way he would, and I'm overdoing it on purpose, but that was Sir John. And if Sir John was Hamlet, it would be to be or not to be. That is the question. And so that fell very easily into business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the ocean of my business. And we needed somebody in the cast who could get to that. And Sir John, bless him, was on call and came in. I thought Sir John was brilliant as Jacob Marley, and I was very grateful for having seen Sir John's work and and having his spirit on stage with me for those scenes, which were very challenging and very gratifying to play. So then we have the three ghosts. Of course, the third ghost was easy because it doesn't say anything. But the Ghost of Christmas Past, it says it was a, oh boy, can I get this? It was a strange creature, like a child. Not so much like a child. It's like an old man seen through something which made it seem diminished from the view. And an old man in a child's proportions. And its voice sounded far away. And on stage, I was trying to do a thing that was sort of like this, very light and high in this way, but it wasn't really working this time through on the camera, on the microphone. And so we thought, well, okay, and literally took a cushion. And when I would speak with the voice, said the ghost, and I would speak here, said the ghost, which gave it a little bit of a distance to it. And we'll see how that works. We're hearing the first, our brilliant sound engineer, Brandon Reed, is putting out a first cut. We've done the recording of my work, and Brandon's putting out a cut tomorrow. So we'll hear how the Ghost of Christmas Past sounds using that very simple device. Then the Ghost of Christmas Present. This was another one of those where I was wondering, well, because it's this jolly green giant. And of course, we've all seen the movies, and it's, you know, it's a big thing with the thing and the torch and everything. And I thought, well, who could this possibly be? And I was doing it one day, and something where I went up here, and a kind of thing happened with my S's. And I thought, oh my God, it's Sean Connery. So the Ghost of Christmas Present is Sean Connery, Bond, James Bond. Present, Ghost of Present, yeah. So, and that was a tricky one, because when Scrooge and Christmas Present went back and forth, as they did sometimes, it was hard, it was challenging to go from Scrooge to Christmas Present and then back to Scrooge. So in those scenes, I would, and almost all of them, and it was good because Scrooge is very much off balance in those scenes. And it'd be, and so every time Scrooge talks, it gave me a chance to readjust, but also to find Scrooge's voice. And whenever he would say something, he would have a little hesitation at the beginning of his lines, which helped a great deal. And then finally, the last, boy, here's a great example. I'm gonna talk about Tiny Tim just for a second. This was another great note that Mikey gave me. When Tiny Tim first appears, he's on, Bob has him on the shoulder, and the line goes, and in came Bob, with his 3 feet of scarf hanging down before him, and Tiny Tim on his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and had his legs and his limbs were contained in an iron frame, something like that. And the gravitational pull toward emotion in this piece is very strong. And without knowing it, I slipped into my feeling about Tiny Tim. Alas for Tiny Tim. And the key in this kind of material, particularly working solo with an audience, is that you want the audience to have the experience, not the actor. And this goes, I think we talked about our friend, the cheerleader, when we were doing To Be or Not to Be, talking about To Be or Not to Be, our friend, the cheerleader, who tries to excite 5,000 people. She does not try to be as excited as 5,000 people. And how does she do that? Through discipline and practice and rigor and strength and repetition. So Mikey gave me the note. He called my attention to that and said, what if we're surprised that we've never seen Tiny Tim before? Because of course we haven't, even though of course we have, because we've seen all the movies. So it was, Bob came in with 3 feet of scarf hanging down before him and Tiny Tim on his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim. Look at that, audience. He bore a little crutch and had his limbs something in an iron frame. So it's not about how I feel, but painting the picture for the audience so they can be drawn into the event and they can have the feeling. And then finding Tiny Tim's voice. God bless us, everyone. So of course it's going to be very light and high because he's small and he has to sing at one point the Christmas carol, "Oh little one sweet, oh little one mild." Oh little one sweet, oh little one mild, with joy thou hast the whole world filled. So Tiny Tim, I worked with a couple of speech traits. A lip friction R was one that I work with for Tiny Tim. And the TH sounds became T sounds. So the whole world filled. Thou camest here from heaven's domain to bring men comfort in their pain. Oh, little one sweet, oh, little one mild. And that moment in the play, after all the rush of the big feast, absolutely still, down center, looking up at a light, sing that, hold. There was nothing remarkable about that. And then in my own voice, talking to the audience as the storyteller, saying, folks, these people, not fancy, clothes aren't waterproof, but they were happy, pleased with each other, and contented with the time. And it was a really beautiful moment of connection with the audience at that point. Yeah. So God bless us, everyone. And I'll ask Kathy to come back in, and we'll have time for a couple of questions.
Oh, Ray, I've got to find my camera. I'm completely just smitten and completely, wow, that was just such a lovely sharing. Thank you so much. I've known you a long time, and boy, I just learned a whole bunch. I've been so fortunate to perform with you so often, and
Yeah.
every time I can't tell you. I'm so glad we're recording this.
I think it's been 20 years, Kat. I think we're doing pretty good.
We're doing pretty good. But that was just so beautiful. And it's so moving because just watching you talk about the piece and when the emotion kind of catches you a little bit, or you, Ray, our leader this evening, because when I remember watching it last year and it was so emotional. It's one of those shows you think, oh, I know this story. We all know this story, but it is such an incredibly moving piece, and it was just delightful to watch you help walk through that with us, and to remember how beautifully it was done. So we do have some questions here. I want to get to a couple of them. I don't want to take up all the time. The first one we have, which is a great question, is from Wendy, and her question is, why is Dickens' story called A Christmas Carol? I think of A Christmas Carol as a song.
Yeah. That's a great question. I did a little research into that, and he quite, it seems, anyway, I'll try to speak for Charles Dickens, yeah, good luck. But it seems that he hoped that it would be, that of course carol, and thinking like an actor, you go to the Oxford English Dictionary and you look up carol, and you see there that it is like a sacred song usually associated with Christmas, although not always. There are New Year's carols and others, but they are a sacred song associated with usually Christmas that are sung at that season. And Dickens called it a Christmas carol, hoping that it would be like a song that people would revisit every Christmas. And of course, with pick your movie, my favorite was always Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, but I'm dating myself. But
That's actually a question, Ray. So
oh, okay, yeah,
one of our audience members, they're like, "What is your favorite Scrooge?"
yeah, it's Mr. Magoo, definitely Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. But so, and you know, in that invocation, which we I read out of the book before starting Marley Was Dead, I have endeavored in this ghostly little book, says Dickens, to raise the ghost of an idea, which will not put my readers out of humor with themselves, with each other, or with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, their faithful friend and servant, Charles Dickens. So I think he called it a Christmas carol because he wanted it to be a song that we bring out every Christmas to celebrate renewal, rebirth, and obviously the birth of the Christ child as well.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yes.
yeah, that's beautiful, because we certainly, just really, just again, and we have some comments from people talking about how transcendent the experience was to watch you do it in 2017. And yeah, it's one of those pieces that's our humanity is just right there. And it takes us all back, I think, to being that child filled with wonder every time we hear it. Here's another question that is from one of our audience members. It says, this isn't the first time that you've done the show. So what changes when you return? And of course, you've got such great experience with it. And I want to just expand on that a little bit to talk about the difference between even 2017 to the audio version.
Yeah. Well, I think one way to talk about this is we were planning this before COVID hit. And Mikey and I and Brandon, our sound engineer, and Bobby, because we were thinking of going back into the we were hoping, and I think this is a better way of saying it, we were hoping in March and April that by this time we could go back, and we were going to do it in the Paul Green, I believe, this time. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I'd like it to be authentic again, but it has to be authentic for now. And one of the early ideas we had was that the Paul Green Theater, of course, has been dark, with only a ghost light. Much was made of that. That's the single light bulb that always stands in the theater. But we thought about all kinds of ways of bringing the theater back to life with the beginning of this play, that I would come in and maybe take some sheets off of furniture that I would have trouble speaking, as if the whole thing was starting up again, and eventually we were bringing the theater back to life. And it was a very beautiful idea, and we had a great time thinking about it and imagining how we might do that. Unfortunately, we were not able to do it. But that's getting to the essence of the question: is how does the play relate now? Certainly, one can do it as what we might call a museum piece. No pejorative intended. You know, beautifully done in Victorian costumes and the whole thing, and it would be terrific. I now, at this stage in my life, I'm more interested in the connection between human beings and what's happening now and how it might relate to now, while staying true to the text and staying true to what I see as the spirit of the text. But this idea of bringing a theater back to life with this story of rebirth and regeneration, to me was very powerful.
That's just absolutely beautiful. And well, don't never say never.
That's right.
I have a question from Brian.
Yep.
Says, how much do you, Ray, carry this 1, 2, 3 tempo into your own conversations to change people's perspectives?
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. That's a great question. Oh boy. That particular tool, and it is a tool. It's one of the things that I when I'm teaching, and when I'm teaching Shakespeare or Dickens or any heightened text material, that I incorporate in various ways into what I'm doing. That kind of acting is very different than, for example, acting on camera, where it's not useful all that much at all, because on camera we want to be behaving usually as if we're here in real life, us together now, right? Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's all very naturalistic. So particularly answer to your question, Brian, only if I were intentionally trying to persuade or change, if I were making a speech somewhere, certainly anytime I'm reading, if it's the Bible, or anytime I'm reading publicly, I would incorporate those kinds of speech activation tools. But in my my normal life, whatever that is, I would say less so. But I'm going to now start paying attention and see.
Well, your technique and the way you talked about how you learned the text, because both, we often get that question from our community is, how did you learn those lines? How do you ever learn those lines? And, but seriously, I was like, I'm going to ask Ray that question, and you answered it beautifully. I'm not going to ask you it again, but tonight I was like, no, tonight I'm going to ask that question, because that was 45 pages of text. So having you speak about the way that you, your technique and the way that the scaffolding was really lovely to put it together, and the time it takes to get it into your body, and just, and the way you developed all the character voices as well. I have to admit, I'm loving the idea of, like, Dick Van Dyke and Sean Connery, and it's really wonderful, and it's beautiful, because you don't see that, of course, when you're performing. We see just you and your brilliance, but to hear you talk about it is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's not so lonely up there.
Right. Well, you do it. It is nice. It's kind of like you have your friends and colleagues. It's fantastic.
That's right. Yeah.
I have another question from Wendy. She says, how much direction does a one-man show take? So this is interesting, because I guess who directed the first time you did it?
That was Bill William Leach, and Bill himself is an actor. So it's a really good question, Wendy. It goes, and this is a whole hour talk, but it goes to the relationship between actors and directors. And Bill himself, being an actor and having done it, this is in 1998, Bill's way of directing was sort of to try to get me to do it, and no harm to Bill, to try to get me to do it the way he thought it should be done. And in doing so, when a director does that, it can interfere with the actor's own process, which is one of rummaging around in your brain and your imagination and your memory, and trying to balance that with being accurate with the text. And it's just a big mess sometimes for a couple of weeks. And Michael Perlman, our associate artistic director, who is a director, he acted a long time ago, but he's a director. And so with Mikey, and also I want to say with Jesse Berger, who directed an Iliad, that the one-man show, that a telling of the Trojan War, which was back in, what was it, 2015, I think. Both Mikey and Jesse, they just sat there. They just sat there and they let me work for sometimes an hour. And then Mikey would come up and say something like, well, the one little note that he gave me for the audio, which was spot on. Oh, the other great one for the audio, and you can listen for this, is when we got into Christmas Future, Mikey said, let's try one where everything comes down and it's more intimate and it's more quiet. And I think that's going to be really effective. It was, it was great. But a lot of the work in 2017 that you saw with the table, a lot of the angles of the table, a lot of the use of the table that we did, a lot of that was Mikey's eye sitting out in the audience. The acting of it, he let me do. And that is, in a piece like this, that is what the director ought to be doing, is letting the actor do the actor's work, and then coming in and a little bit of shaping. You did it this way and you did it this way. This way's better. You put the table here. Can we have that on a 45-degree angle? It'll look more interesting. Those kinds of notes. But in terms of the accessing of the inner life and the finding of the truth of it, the director just has to stay, literally has to stay out of the way, because for an actor to really be free to work, you can't be flinching. Oh, is he going to jump in? Is he going to interrupt me? That shuts you down. And Mikey's wonderful in that way, as was Jesse for the Iliad. It's just a lot of sitting, letting the actor flail, and then small notes that really bring it all, bring it all together like a precipitator in a chemistry experiment.
Well, Ray, listening to you talk about your process, I mean, it would be a real privilege to sit in the room and just to watch you work and to let you put everything in the pot and just cook up what you're going to cook up. It would be great. I have one final question for you before we wrap up. Just watching you talk about this piece and how you connect to each of these characters, is there one character in A Christmas Carol that you just is your the question is it your favorite character, but is there one that's just like your heart?
Yeah. Well, obviously there are many, but the one character that I loved playing was Mrs. Cratchit. Because she told the truth. It was I'm not, let's see if I can do just a little Mrs. Cratchit. The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it. My dear, says Bob, the children, Christmas Day. Well, it should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, when I drink the health of such a stingy, hard-feeling, unflinching man as Mr. Scrooge. My dear, Christmas Day, says Bob. Well, I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, not for his. Merry Christmas to him, and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. So, yeah, Mrs. Cratchit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Ray, I just don't know how to thank you. I know we have to wrap up and sign off. I just think maybe it's just the day, the period we're in, the state of the world, but this is just such a lovely little Christmas carol that you've given to us, and it's beautiful to hear you talk about the work and to watch you connect with it on such a deep way. And I'm super excited about the audio play, and we're still going to do that version on stage. Just give us maybe in another season. So
yeah, sounds good, Kath.
All right,
thanks.
Thank you so much for such an incredible evening.
Sure.
You were really terrific. But everybody, before you sign off, I just want to do a few more things with you here tonight. I know that you all are aware that the performing arts are in a really unprecedented moment of hibernation and rediscovery. And while we know that nothing can replace the joy of experiencing live theater like we do at Playmakers, where we're in communion, where we're sitting next to each other, we at Playmakers are hard at work to make sure that we remain an entry point for sharing our craft, and most importantly, for telling the stories that help us all understand who we are and what we're going through. So we ask you for your support, monetary support if you're able, but even the support of buying tickets and watching the work we prepare for you. It just never fails to uplift us and lift our spirits, and we hope we lift your spirits as well. So please don't forget to check our website to learn about more of what's coming up and coming your way in the 2021 season, and to learn more ways that you can support Playmakers. And please join us for the special benefit reading of Love, Loss, and What I Wore on December 6th. And then remember to celebrate the holidays with Ray Dooley's beautiful audio drama version of A Christmas Carol. That'll be starting December 14th. So please go to playmakersrep.org to purchase your tickets or to access your account if you're already a subscriber. Everybody, thank you so very much for being here. We wish you the happiest of holidays. Have a beautiful Thanksgiving. Stay safe, hug your loved ones, and we look forward to seeing you all again, both online and back in the theater. Thank you all very much and have a great evening. Thank you, Ray. Good night, everybody.
Good night.